I have not made a floating home video here in a couple years, and it's really kind of a shame because these videos have really been serving me well. I've had a ton of reach outs from folks looking to buy or sell floating homes. The market has changed enough now that I think it's appropriate to add some additional information. So I'm going to talk about primarily some of the pitfalls of buying and selling floating homes, some of the challenges, but I never provide negative information without also applying solutions to those problems. So we're going to talk about those. So we're going to talk about valuing floating homes. How do we go about coming up with a value, an accurate value for a floating home? Actually, the best value is what a willing buyer and a willing seller is willing to go into a transaction with. But as a seller, how do you come up with the right price to get the most you can for your home? And as a buyer, how do you present an offer that's a realistic amount you're willing to pay, that you're not going to overpay? Zillow does a horrible job of projecting values on floating homes, and we'll get into that detail a little bit further. They also do a poor job of presenting listings for floating homes, but Zillow does a great job of marketing their services. Just about everybody I know uses Zillow to search for homes, and they've come to rely on Zillow as the source for looking for homes and coming up with values for homes. But this is really problematic with floating homes. I recently had a gentleman say, I only came up with 43 listings for floating homes. And I said, well, how are you looking for those? And he said, well, I'm using Zillow. And I told him, well, I've got 73 on the RMLS and on my personal floating home search page. So I don't know what to tell you other than you're using the wrong search engine. So this is Joseph Nelson. I am a realtor in both Oregon and Washington, serving primarily the Portland, Vancouver greater areas. My specialties are, of course, floating homes, rural properties, acreage, relocation of folks moving to and from the Portland, Vancouver area, and new home sales. Today's call to action, since you're here looking at a floating home video, is to go to my floating home video search page, and I'll give you the verbal link to my page. I'm going to flash it up on the screen as well, but you can go down below the video in the Show More section, and I have it linked where you can just hit the button. It'll take you right there. josephNelson.morerealty.com/D8QWPHBC. I have this set to show the newest listings first, so each time you come to this page, you'll immediately be able to see if there's a new listing on the market. Okay, here we go. That's enough self-promotion for now. Zillow does a better job of projecting home values on homes on land than it does floating homes. And this is due to three primary factors. One, there are a lot more homes on land to sample from, and their algorithms do a lot better when they have a lot more to sample from. Number two, the assumption is that all homes are built on land that the owner owns, and that's not always the case with floating homes. And three, the assumption on homes on land is that the foundation is serviceable and in good condition. You can't make any of these assumptions with floating homes, and the algorithms don't take any of this into account. There are currently 77 listings for floating homes in the Portland market. And at any one time, there are about 9,000 listings for homes in the Portland, Vancouver market. And this includes floating homes. Floating homes comprise of less than 1% of the total market in the Portland, Vancouver area. Next, floating homes that have owned slips are only 30% of the market, where rented slips are 70%. Next, float systems. We'll just call these foundations. They're all over the board. Unlike foundations on land, even homes that are 100 years old can have really good foundations. And they rate these float systems from 1 to 5, 5 being the best. Financing is available from 3 to 5. 1 to 2 are cash only or bring cash to closing to do the upgrades to the float system or wrap the float system upgrades into the financing. But ultimately, to get a 30-year loan, the lender wants to know that the float system is going to last 30 years. So Zillow and even the homeowner and generally the prospective home buyer is comparing square footage of the floating home and the condition of the home and the kind of upgrades that have been done to determine value, and totally disregarding the condition of the float system because it's infrastructure. And most of us are not able to evaluate even roughly what kind of condition the float system is in. Zillow also does not take into account the cost of the HOA fee or slip rent on a monthly basis. Then is there gated parking? Many of the Portland mortgages have really good fenced and gated parking. Others don't. So let's start as a seller. How can we avoid heartache of putting our home on the market and getting our home sold? I have a story for you, and this is a true story. These folks placed their home on the market, and a number of years ago, they had a float survey, and it came out a 4, which is really good. They put their home on the market. Okay, great. They get an offer, and they accept the offer. And the prospective buyer comes in and does a whole home inspection and a float survey. And the survey comes in at 2. And they also got a estimate to bring it up to an acceptable rating. And it came in that needed $100,000 worth of work. And this work is very invasive. When they replace the stringers on the home, they have to tear up the floors on the bottom story. And all they leave is the floors under the cabinets and the toilet. All the rest of the floors are removed. The seller and buyer could not come to an agreement to keep the deal alive. The buyers backed out, and unfortunately they lost $750 for the float survey and about $450 for the whole home inspection. And they're just out that money. But they went in with their eyes open, and they did not buy a home that needed $100,000 worth of float work. 2 years later, the home is still on the market. I would not want to be the realtor representing the seller who is demoralized for a number of years due to poor management of expectations. So the takeaway here is get a float inspection prior to putting your home on the market and know exactly where it's at right now. And this survey is good for 6 months. And this should be ample time to get your home sold. And financing should be a breeze. If the survey comes in at 3 or above, we can market the property as financeable. So the lesson here is be realistic. You cannot compare your property with your neighbor's property, which is very similar in size, quality, and upgrades, with your float system that's in poor shape, but their float system, which is in great shape. There could be $100,000 difference in value between your property and the neighbor's property. Now you're going to say, okay, the downside of getting a pre-sale inspection of any kind is that you no longer have plausible deniability and you'll have to disclose the condition of the home. But I believe it is better to go in with your eyes open and expectations in line with reality. I would never recommend to a buyer to buy a floating home without a float survey. So they're going to get one on their own anyway. And no floating home will be financed without one. So get it out in the open early and have time to get your expectations set correctly. And if this means not putting your home on the market because you can't get what you want for it, fine. But let's not put your home on the market, get all excited about moving, and then find out you can't afford to move. Okay, for buyers, we have 3 things that I think are important to consider. Number 1, do your due diligence. Do not get overly motivated by the lifestyle. It's very seductive. Ideally, buy a home that has steel stringers rather than wood. Hold fast on waiting for that home that has steel stringers or has logs that are newer with the stringers that are 6 to 12 inches out of the water. this is a good long-term alternative. But if the stringers are close to the water, they will be getting wet and the rot process will start. And I regularly see stringers in contact with the water, even in calm conditions. And this is a recipe for disaster and a very short-lived float system. Remember, steel stringers give you peace of mind for decades. Number 3, how much is the monthly cost of the HOA or slip rent? It ranges from a low of about $325 to $1,500 a month. The low end is always owned slips, but owned slips typically cost $50,000 to $100,000 more up front. So we'll have to look at how long it would take to make up the difference between a $400 a month owned slip paying $70,000 more up front with a $800 a month rented slip that you're getting for $70,000 less than you would if you were buying an owned slip. There is one mortgage I'm aware of in the Jantzen Beach area that is $1,500 a month for a rented slip. And the rate of sales there is extremely low, and I would caution all of my buyers to think hard about buying a home there, because when you get ready to move, it's going to be extremely hard to sell. So how do we find all the floating homes that are currently on the market? We follow the link to my website, which feeds directly from the RMLS. It is updated constantly. I look at it one time at 9 in the morning and there's 77 homes on it. I look at it again at noon and there's 74. It includes Portland, of course, Ridgefield, which currently there's none for sale in Ridgefield, Sauvie Island, Scappoose, St. Helens, Multnomah Channel, McAdam, Selwood area. Weirdly enough, parts of Scappoose are in Multnomah County and have Portland Public Schools, and parts of Scappoose are in Columbia County and Columbia County Schools. So living in Scappoose, you may or may not escape the higher property taxes of Multnomah County. But if you're working in Portland, the drive from these areas to Portland or Vancouver can be pretty daunting. The traffic can be pretty bad. There is no other bridge over the Columbia besides the one at Jantzen Beach on I-5, or to the west in Longview, which is quite a long drive. Now, if you're going north on I-5 to north of Longview to, say, Seattle, that'd be fine to go that way. But the drive to Hillsboro, if you're working in the Silicon Forest at, say, Intel, that's a great drive. Just pop over the hill to Hillsboro. So reach out to me with any questions you might have about floating homes and living the floating home lifestyle. I'm currently the only realtor in the market who makes educational videos about floating homes. Now, there are other realtors who are making videos, but they're more sales and marketing videos for specific floating homes. And I do those too, but this channel, the purpose of this channel is education, and that's what this video is about. So try the link to my floating home listing search page and shoot me a text to start your own moving experience. It is hard to put into words how awesome the floating home lifestyle is. Land-based river life costs are in the millions. Floating homes are an affordable lifestyle. But remember, no first-time home buyer programs, no FHA standard conventional loans. These are portfolio loans, 20% down, great credit with only a handful of lenders. You will have to pass a mortgage background check, no criminal backgrounds of anyone living in the home. I had one woman wanting to buy a floating home for her son to live in who was getting out of prison. I had to tell her it's not going to happen. And also a common question or desire is to buy a floating home as a second home and use it as an Airbnb. And there are no short-term rental mortgages in the Portland area. 90 days, some of them are good for 90-day rental. Some don't allow rentals at all. Current market conditions for floating homes. Floating home sales, to sell a floating home generally takes a little bit longer than a home on land. And just like all other homes right now, market time is up. My best advice right now is to sell your current home, no matter where you're living, on land or on the water. Sell your current home as soon as you get a strong offer, then make an offer on your new home. That's what we did 6 months ago. We were homeless for 2 hours from the time our old home closed and funded to the time that our new home recorded was 2 hours. And I can do that for you as well. It's not easy. There are times when it goes into the next day. You might be homeless for 12, 18 hours. But I can't tell you it's not a stressful time. It's always less stressful to buy your new home before you sell your old one. But in this market, with the high interest rates, for most people, that just doesn't work. But we use the proceeds from our departing home to buy our new one. And that's what most people are doing right now. Now, if you have the depth to buy a new home or to carry a short-term mortgage for your new home before you sell the old one, great. Most of the people, my advice is to sell your old home before you buy your new one. And this is the best practice for the majority of us in this current market. So far, prices have not declined. We're seeing in the news that prices are going to come down. They have not done so. There are some markets in the United States where prices have declined, but these are markets that tend to be really, the prices go up super high for a period of time and they tend to come down. Our prices here in the Portland, Vancouver market have not come down, and we're not expecting them to. But that said, remember, price fixes everything. Depending on your motivation to move, lowering your price is always sweetens the sale. But be ready for your home to be on the market for months rather than days. Now, there are exceptions. We are still seeing homes that are highly desirable sell in days with multiple offers, but that is the exception rather than the rule. In a way, it's kind of sad when I talk about current market conditions that these videos don't have a longer shelf life, because in a month I could be telling you something totally different than I'm telling you right now. But as of early August 2023, this is my current market advice. We expect interest rates for the foreseeable future to continue to go up. So waiting to move until the rates come down could be until after the next election in 2024. So if it's time to move, let's talk about how we can position you to best do that and get you onto your next season of life as we have done. So with that, peace be with you and goodbye.